Welcome everybody. This is Stephen Ashurst from Delta Energy and Environment. I'm a senior analyst, joined by my colleague Valts Grintals.
Hello everyone.
And Miranda Mayes.
Hello.
And this is our latest podcast from the heat research team here at Delta Energy and Environment. And today we're going to be talking about the research the three of us have been doing using our customer panel. So as I mentioned, I'm a senior analyst here. I am the head of our Heat Insight service. Valts is our lead analyst on that research, and we've been working also with Miranda Mayes. Miranda, would you mind just giving an introduction about yourself?
Yes, sure. I'm a research consultant with over 26 years experience in the market research sector, specialising in particular in the utilities sector. Ideal.
And the reason we've been working with you is that our Heat Insight service focuses on the opportunity for low carbon and conventional heating systems in the domestic British market. So we conduct research with private homeowners, with house builders, with social landlords, and we usually look to understand where the key market opportunities are for different heating technologies. On that point, this year we are using our newly established customer panel, which Miranda, you've had a major hand in our managing for us. So can you just give everyone a bit of an introduction as to why we would go about our research in this way, and really what are the key benefits of researching this topic with the use of a customer panel?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of benefits to using a panel for the Heat Insight service in particular. So, for example, by returning to the same pool of participants, which is of course what a panel enables us to do, we can track changes in the attitudes and likely uptake of different products and services with that same pool of participants, and we can, in a similar way, measure the impact of specific initiatives, and I mean that might be different products or services, it might be costs, it might be different ways of communicating about those products and services, by comparing the responses that we get from the panel early in the research phase to responses we get in subsequent surveys. And we can also sort of grow a dialogue, if you like, with those panelists. So we can explore the responses that we get in the early surveys in later surveys, which helps enhance our understanding of the information that we're getting in early phases and provide greater insight for subscribers. So there's that, but there's also the greater engagement that we get when you use a panel of subscribers. So we get regular, by using regular surveys and providing summaries of findings to our panelists as we explore different issues, and by incentivizing them to participate on an ongoing basis, it means that the data that we get comes from a more engaged panel, so a more thoughtful panel, if you like, so we get better responses in that way. I guess other things that we thought about when planning this was the access that it provides to a subscriber to the survey, service, to a sample, a big profiled sample, and equally to niche participants, so hard to reach groups, which in the past we've found difficult to find. We now have a ready, if small, pool of participants that might be, for example, self-builders or people who own electric vehicles or people that have smart heating controls. So that enables us to tap into those niche groups, and subscribers to tap into those niche groups with, say, a phase of depth interviews or online focus groups or something of that type. So as you can see, there's a range of benefits to a panel approach.
That's it, yeah, and the latter point you raise is something I'm particularly interested in and excited about, is really identifying these hard to reach customers, whether they be those ones who are most likely to be your early adopters of more expensive low carbon technologies, or again, like you referenced, there are people who who are already adopters and can share really valuable feedback, say on
Absolutely.
whether it have been the sales journey, the sales process, or the actual experience of having a heat pump in their house or a smart heating control in their house. And obviously what we look to do is understand the key selling points to those and be able to feed those back to our subscribers. So we're about halfway through the research program for this year. In a moment, Valts, you can maybe give us an update on the research we've done so far, what we're going to do in the future as well. So yeah.
Yeah, of course. So we've finished just now our baselining customer survey, where we did a online survey with 1,000 or sample of 1,000 customers, and that's been finished now, and we are on to finalizing our second customer panel exercise, which is in-depth interviews with 20 particularly interesting customers. So what Miranda mentioned just previously, we have the option of baselining these 1,000 customers, looking at which ones are the most interesting ones, and coming back to them and having a more in-depth conversation with them. So this is the second report that we're currently working on, and it focuses around business models in the UK heating industry, servicing contracts, smart controls, and just how customers, the customer attitudes against buying heat. And this will lead to our third customer survey, which will be again an online survey where we'll focus more on business models in the heating industry, which is a hot topic now in different energy areas.
That's right. So we're seeing the heating market being disrupted somewhat, especially especially in other European markets, say Germany in particular, with providers, retailers approaching the market in different ways, whether that be through different ways for customers to buy heating systems, or different ways in terms of the process of buying, or maybe different ways to pay for them, perhaps not paying for them, and the provider getting their value from other revenue streams. So yeah, like Val said, the results from our current phase of research will build into our forthcoming survey. Other elements that we can potentially do with this panel would be things like online focus groups as well. So we can identify particular sales pitches, business models, which would be interesting or more interesting to a particular set or subset of people in our panel, and have an online focus group, a discussion over a night, over a couple of nights, over a week. Again, just get really valuable first-hand feedback from that. Yeah, we have 1,000 panelists to choose from, so it's a very robust representative set of UK private homeowners. Just to give a little bit more background, that's what our panel is made up of. All these people are higher socio-economic groups, the typical people who would either install a low carbon heating system, or who are at least in charge of the buying decisions in the home. People who live in houses, not flats, for obvious reasons. And we also have a higher than you would naturally get sample of off-gas people. So as we know, up to this point and out into the future, this is going to be a really important segment for uptake of non-conventional technologies. But that's enough for me. It's probably a good time just to start sharing some highlights of the research that we've come to so far. Valts, Miranda, you two are really involved in this second piece that we've been doing, the in-depth interviews with 20 people who we identified as particularly interesting from our first survey. And like Valts said, we looked at the kind of key points we looked to address. Our attitudes towards buying heat, how are people doing it just now, how might they want to do it in future, attitudes towards servicing along with that, and we really wanted to get early feedback from the first adopters of smart heating controls as well. Another really hot topic in the heating industry right now, not just in the UK but further afield. So yeah, what's came out for the two of you is really interesting findings, highlights so far.
Yeah, well, I think just in terms of the profiling, I think one of the things that was interesting, or perhaps not surprising, but was actually finding people with smart heating controls that we could talk to. I mean, obviously we wanted to find as many as possible, but we also wanted to talk to people who were just ABs, because our previous research had shown us that there was a particular propensity or likelihood of the AB groups taking up smart heating controls and smart products. So we really narrowed.
Sorry, man. Those are the highest earners.
Absolutely, the highest income earners, so that really narrowed down the group that was available to us to talk to, but it also meant that they were very focused, and we would get particularly useful feedback from them. But we only managed to find 2 who actually had smart heating controls out of the 20 that we spoke to. But nevertheless got some very interesting feedback from them. But we also, just sort of prior to that, I think it's also interesting to say that we got a lot of context behind purchasing of heating systems generally before we even spoke about smart heating controls. And I think what was interesting there, and that's, I don't know what you think, but was how many heating system purchases were prompted by a breakdown in the heating system. So in other words, the very high proportion of heating system purchases which are distress purchases, which is really important because that's what then drives the process that they go through to purchase a heating system. It means that they don't have much time to think about it. It means that the first person that's with them to talk about that, which is probably the servicing engineer, is very likely to be included in that purchasing process and very likely to be the person that recommends the next heating system. So that was very interesting as well.
Yeah, just to jump in on that point, well, 2 things. Firstly, my understanding of her findings is that even in this case, where obviously the heating engineer who's come out to do the replacement, has a great opportunity obviously to make the sale because the customer is now in need of a new system. I found that many of the customer transcripts that I read, the heating system engineer hadn't actively tried to upsell a smart heating control. I'm curious if that's the same that yourself and Valts took it, but it was just kind of mind-boggling to me that there's still seems to be a lack of push from the installer side to offer anything anything really other than a like-for-like swap.
Yeah,
when it comes to,
I think that's.
Go on, sorry.
Sorry, Steve. No, I think you're absolutely right. It very much seemed to be the case that, okay, your boiler needs replacing, therefore, this is the boiler that you can have. And occasionally, very occasionally, they might have been suggesting smart heating controls. Very occasionally, they might have suggested a servicing contract. But for the most part, it was, yes, just, here's the boiler. And the same applies for renewable technologies. It was just never the case that the local plumber or installer ever suggested that they might want to replace their boiler with a renewable technology, and that was very interesting. And there's clearly an opportunity there to better inform local plumbers and local installers about the different technologies and smart heating products, etc., that could be offered alongside the boiler or instead of the boiler.
Yeah, and maybe it's not even just the case of informing, but maybe it's the case of incentivizing. Also, with regards to replacing a boiler with something more low carbon, I think we've got a couple of steps and a couple of phases, say, of the industry to get through before we're at that point. But just to come back to the point, to me it seems like a really easy sale. We know from our research that that smart heating controls are the most appealing technology that we cover in our research, based on again, the large sample of customers that give us feedback, even more appealing than solar PV. It's close, but it's smart heating controls, sit on top of the list. Low cost, obviously, compared to other systems for a really good one, what, a few £100.
Yeah.
And if you go by the manufacturer's claims of quite significant running cost savings, if you use them correctly, obviously you're looking at a payback well below 5 years, which is what customers want. So yeah, to me it seems like they're, and just to add on as well, is you don't need days worth or a couple of courses worth of additional training to be able to fit one of these systems. And it just ties in with some anecdotal evidence I've heard from a couple of the installers that I speak to, that I don't know if they're fully sold on the idea yet, on the concept yet of smart heating and how much benefit it brings. I don't know if that's something that we might have to explore in more detail with our installer research later in the programme. But yeah, surely if you're a manufacturer, you look at these results, and certainly in fewer occasions are our customers being even offered the option to upgrade into smart heating control. You've got to think, well, I've got to do something about that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to jump back to what you said about saving money, Stephen, because that was something that came out, particularly here, was that a lot of people, when they were told about a smart heating control, or when they thought about a smart heating control, from what they'd heard about it, they just tended to think in terms of, well, this is a convenience thing. So, if I'm away from the home, or if I'm away on holiday, I can control my heating. If I'm coming back late, I can control my heating. And, a lot of people were saying that as a result, actually, it's a nice to have, but it's not really something that I feel that I need. So a lot of people were discounting it just because they thought it was just sort of a nice thing to have. And they weren't thinking about the cost saving element. But both of the participants that we spoke to who had smart heating controls had seen a cost saving through having them. So, it could be an important thing to get out and perhaps a few case studies or examples, or really get across to people that, yes, there's a fantastic benefit in terms of convenience and comfort, but really, think about it in terms of the cost savings you can make, because, it's very key to everybody that they do save money on their energy costs. So that's perhaps something to really get across as well as one can.
I think so, definitely. Another element that, again, I found particularly interesting, given that our whole purpose of this programme of research is to identify where the opportunities are for growth in the domestic heating space. Obviously, we've just touched upon there that smart heating controls is certainly one. We found a really interesting sort of profile of the domestic UK market with regards to servicing. So, Valts, correct me if I'm wrong, but we found less than half of the market have any sort of servicing or after sales contract.
Yeah, so depends on what kind of customer. When it comes to only, if we separate out only boiler owners, I think it's almost 50-50 split. But then if you start including customers with renewable heat, it goes down to around 40%, or around 40% of the people with heating systems have some kind of servicing.
So in principle, we're saying half the market is still up for grabs in relatively very simplistic terms. But it's servicing. It's a £1 billion industry, even a couple of £1 billion industry in here in the UK. When you consider the average customer maybe pays £180 to £200 a year for a servicing contract. And again, just to touch on the profile, what we found was very interesting. Boiler age, in terms of the percentage of customers, peaks at between about 3 and 6 years old. Again, that's what we found from our research. And actually, it's people who are within that category, or who have even newer boilers, who are more likely to have servicing contracts. Perhaps because installers are more comfortable with upselling servicing at the same time, or perhaps that's something they hand off back to the manufacturer in certain occasions. The manufacturer
I think that's
takes care of
the
that.
thing that we saw also in the Teledepth calls with customers when asking about them having servicing, whether they have servicing. We had few that said that they just got it because they had an offer of getting cheaper servicing as a bundle with their new boiler, so they just choose to have a servicing contract with the new boiler, which again explains this trend that we saw in the first customer panel exercise as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that's it. So, well, when you picture those numbers again, so yeah, it was about half of the half the boilers installed in the installed base are about six years or younger. So obviously,
yeah,
about half of them are 7 years or older, and customers with those boilers are less likely to have any sort of cover on it.
yeah,
Which again, to me, is a sort of big flashing light of an opportunity. Is there any particular offer to be targeted at these people? Maybe maybe they get to the point where the warranty is now expired, and then they decide, well, maybe just risk it, which you can appreciate from a customer point of view. But there has to be something. Like, I don't know if the industry offers limited times offers, if they offer sort of no claims discount type cover. If you just take it out as a precaution. Obviously, we all take it as a precaution, but particularly if your boiler's getting on a bit. You said I've not been paying for any sort of cover up to now, and I've not gone wrong. But this winter, next winter, a bit more concerned if the heating goes down. So maybe if I pay a token amount a month, but if I wasn't going to pay this anyway, so my servicing company will acknowledge that and could offer a sort of a discount for next year if you haven't had anyone out to service it. I don't know. That seemed like quite an obvious.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Stephen, and I think that came out in a couple of the depth interviews, actually, participants saying that they'd stopped taking cover, or they didn't feel they wanted to take cover because of this issue of, well, I don't want to feel like I'm paying something for nothing. So if something can be developed that doesn't make them seem so much, it seems so much like they are paying something for nothing, like the no claims discount, I think you're right. I think there's a pool of people that you can definitely get on board in that way. I think the other thing that we found from the depth interviews was that there are particular life stages where people are more inclined to take out a service contract, and I think that can be tapped into where it's not already. And one was on retirement, which perhaps isn't surprising. I think we all know that at that stage in life, people like the security of knowing that they won't have any unexpected financial expenses coming up, so they tend to then. But I think the one that perhaps was more surprising was the number of people that wanted to take out a service contract when they were starting a family because they didn't want to be in the situation of potentially not having heating or not having hot water with a young family to look after. So that's perhaps a marketplace that can be targeted.
Sure, yeah. Add to that sort of people who move house, again, perhaps a discount within the first X amount of months if you sign up, perhaps bundled with switching your energy supply. We know.
And there is.
Go on, Miranda.
Sorry, the research was certainly seen to suggest that whilst initially offering a large discount might be something that someone's reluctant to do, that certainly in the long term it's likely to pay off, because it seems that once you've got a service contract, it was very common for that simply to be renewed with the same company over and over again. And the other thing that we found about having a service contract is that, as I think we referenced earlier, very often it's the company that is servicing the boiler when it goes wrong that then gets to quote potentially for a new boiler. So there's long-term financial benefits to offering a discounted product to try and get people on board in the first instance.
That's it. And well, like we said at the start of this topic, the untapped value there is literally in the hundreds of millions of pounds a year, if not crossing over into the sort of £1 billion mark. Something that was really interesting that came out, we conducted a willingness to pay exercise. So these people, we identified them, so you don't have servicing or after sales right now, but were you to go for it, what would you be willing to pay for it? And I don't know, maybe you can share some insight on this, Miranda, but I was really quite surprised that the general willingness to pay across the base of customers who didn't have servicing was pretty much exactly what people are paying. But I would imagine
exactly right. Yes, the amount that you're right, which is quite rare because typically in willingness to pay style research, people, when asked in an undisguised way, will say a much lower amount than they actually are prepared to pay. So the fact that they were stating amounts which are pretty much what service contracts cost was surprising, but also very encouraging, because it suggests that people perhaps aren't aware that they could get servicing contracts for the sorts of amounts of money they'd be prepared to pay. So yeah.
Well, that's true. We've done the last year, I think it was, we've done a similar exercise for microgeneration technologies, haven't we? And unsurprisingly, in that scenario, I think lots of customers didn't fully appreciate the cost of, say, an air source heat pump or a biomass boiler. But the results this time was completely different. So the willingness, the prices people were willing to pay were the market rates.
Yeah.
So any other kind of highlights up to this point, Valts, Miranda, that you think would be worth sharing? Obviously, I think halfway through the program, what we're starting to find, although we can't cover everything today, but with regards to low carbon technologies, there are certain customer groups, there are specific customer types with particular attributes who are more open to, willing to, enthusiastic even to install things like heat pumps, solar thermal, like CHP, etc. But they're fewer and more spread out across the country. At this point in time, what we're finding is opportunities for growth, certainly centred around something, not even necessarily something new, but centred around offering something else to go along with conventional heating systems, whether it is a smart heating control, or whether it is trying to get more value from the servicing market, or whether it's, I don't know, a combination of both of those, and offering smarter servicing offers based on products with remote monitoring or diagnostics capabilities. That's I think that's going to be something that we'll explore in the coming months as well. But just before we wrap up, anything final from your sides?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've covered all the key things there, and I think you've summarised it very well. I mean, there's certainly lots of interesting things for us to explore further in the coming waves of research.
Yeah.
Right. Good. Well, in that case, thanks a lot, Miranda, for making the time today. It's been really interesting talking through these results with you, working with you, and looking forward to continuing that. Thank you everyone for listening to our podcast, and stay tuned for the next one.
Yep.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.